Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. Here now is your host, Chad Amond, President and CEO of the Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce.
Hello and welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections. I'm your host, President and CEO of the Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce, Chad Amond. I am delighted to have on the show today Dan Carney. Dan Carney is the Executive Director of the Union Mission. The Union Mission is based in Latrobe but serves the full county and probably segments outside of the county. Right, Dan?
Yeah, that's correct. Thanks for having me here this morning.
Well, we're delighted to have you on the show. The work that you are doing to help people that are suffering in the community is I tip my cap to you. But for the listeners, I think we need to get a little bit of your background. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And all of that stuff. And how did you connect with the Union Mission?
Sure. I'm a Derry graduate. Grew up in Derry and attended St. Vincent College. And while I was going to college there at St. Vincent, was working at Valley Dairy Restaurant in downtown Latrobe. And years ago, the men used to spend their Saturdays down at the restaurant to have lunch. And so I got to know the guys and to get a little bit familiar with this program that was operating in Latrobe that I hadn't heard about until that point in time. And a position became available at the organization for weekend help.
Okay.
And I was really excited because it would help with my schedule, with school, of course. And the guys that were coming to the restaurant encouraged me to apply. And here I am, 14 years later, with the organization. I fell in love with the work that we were doing. I fell in love with the vision of the organization, and just have really committed myself to being there.
So when you talk about the vision and the mission of the organization, let's make sure that the listeners understand what does the Union Mission do?
Sure. Most people who have heard of Union Mission know us for our shelter program that we operate out of Latrobe, but the organization is one of those small but mighty forces in this county. We're part of a 20-county continuum of care network of programs focused on housing issues in local counties. If you look at western Pennsylvania, we're that chunk from McKean and Elk County the whole way down to Greene. And so, it's really important to us as an organization, especially in Westmoreland County, to be focused on ending homelessness.
Okay.
And we do that through a battery of programs and services. While we're known for the shelter, we do operate several other programs in this county to reach not just men, but families and single women as well.
Well, I understand that you have just broken ground on a new building. Talk about that project.
We're very excited about this project. It's been about 6 years in the making to get us to this point. And we have realized that since 2009, we had a waiting list for shelter in our program for men, which was really cumbersome. It was really a problem for us as a community organization to say there are people that we can't serve. And we wanted to work on being able to meet them in that time of immediate crisis. And so we began to kind of stratify our data to figure out how many beds do we really need to serve Westmoreland County. And we put together a plan. We're partnering with Homes Build Hope, an organization that's a nonprofit in the community that builds affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And we've developed a partnership with them to have them build this property for us and maintain it into the future so that we can add more bed space for homeless shelter in this county for men.
So how many men do you serve on an average year, and what was the gap that you needed to make sure that you're providing?
Sure. On an average year, we're seeing between 200 and 250 men that come through the shelter program. They stay on average 60 days in that program.
Okay.
But we're getting calls in the 500 range. So what would happen is somebody would call. We had an intervention program where we would bring them into the shelter for a few days just to problem solve. If you think about like an emergency room model, we would triage the situation and help try to set up temporary housing for them. Maybe that would be with a family member or a friend, or sometimes a shelter in another county, and we would make sure they had transportation to get there until we could serve them. What we realized is we needed to add those at least an additional 7 beds into this county. And our facility that we had been operating out of for the last 30 years was just too small. We have one shower right now for 14 guys. It's a small dining room facility. And so we're building the shelter right now to house initially 24 men. And we really wanted to make sure that we weren't just hitting that minimum threshold, but that we had a little bit of wiggle room, so to speak. And we're planning and working with Homes Build Hope for phase 2, which will allow us even more space to make sure that if need in the future presents, we're prepared for
and
it.
Your current location is near the pond or Latrobe Steel, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're right on Harrison Avenue. For those that are familiar with downtown Latrobe, it's the pond sits in the Y of the road, and you bear that left, and that's where we're at.
So where will your new location be?
We were fortunate enough, we have enough ground space at our current site that we're able to build beside our building that we're in right now, so that we don't have to suspend operations or temporarily move anybody. And then once we're completed, we'll tear down our current building.
You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on Hometown Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. I'm your host, Chad Amond, president of the Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce. We're talking with Dan Carney. Dan is the executive director of Union Mission, based out of Latrobe, but serving homeless men all throughout the county. Dan, let's get into why is homelessness an issue for men in our Westmoreland County?
Sure. When we talk about homelessness as a whole, we try to really look at it through the lens of why people become housing insecure. And when we start to break that down, a major contributing factor really is economics. And so when we look at folks who are struggling in the day-to-day, those that don't have a lot of income coming into their household, or they're struggling to just get by, one little setback can certainly disrupt their housing flow. And when we talk about economics, there's a lot of things that can affect it. So family problems, drug and alcohol issues, mental health challenges that our folks are facing. And so there are a lot of things in a person's life that can affect their economic portfolio that can also then therefore affect their housing. And we know that in our community we're experiencing larger levels of poverty. We're seeing growth in the drug epidemic in our community. And we also know that with mental health and the changes in some of the programs that the mental health community has had and the loss of funding certainly affects the ability for our folks who are at that point of tipping. One little thing can set them off.
What is the primary issue that you see you're on the front lines of this day in and day out? Is it mental health? Is it addiction? Or is it a combination of those factors?
What we're finding more and more, years ago when I first started, the issue was really alcoholism. Was one of the primary reasons we would see folks at the shelter. We're now dealing with more and more complex cases. So the cases that we're seeing are folks that have forensic issues, criminal background problems that sometimes impede their ability to find employment or to have gainful successes, mixed in with drug and alcohol, mental health. And so when you look at that kind of comorbidity, we're talking about cases where it's not just we can fix one piece of the puzzle and everything else is going to fall in line. We have to stratify our approaches to help across all of those areas, and so that we can help our guys be successful when they transition back into community.
One of the things that I would expect that the general public would think that the Union Mission provides only homeless shelter, but I understand, and I know that as an organization, you do provide more than just shelter. Tell the listeners a little bit more about what you do, providing programs and services to help the men that are in our community that are struggling.
Sure. So we are known in the community primarily for the shelter because that's the thing that we fundraise the most for, and it's out there in the community. But we are fortunate enough to be, again, partnered in the community and receiving funding for other programs. We have 14 apartments throughout Greensburg and Latrobe that are permanent supportive housing programs. Those programs really work with chronically homeless, those folks that have those high needs that we were just talking about across multiple systems. systems that have something that's affecting their ability to maintain stable housing, whether that's drug and alcohol, mental health, or a physical health problem, and they have a long history of homelessness. And what we find is those folks take up a lot of resources in our community. They're the ones going to the emergency rooms often, but just because they don't have a place to stay, or they're doing something to go to prison for a while just to help mitigate being out on the street. And so by pulling them into that kind of program, we're able to wrap services around them from the dignity and comfort of home. We're able to meet them where they're at and provide them that safe living space so that they can relearn new skills so that we can take time with them. And that program being permanent has no restriction on the length of stay that those folks can stay in the program, although we try to work with them on their individual needs to help stratify that transition. That's one of the programs we offer in the community that I think folks would be interested to know about.
Right.
Another is we have a shared housing program for transition age youth. One of the largest populations that we serve in Westmoreland County is our transition age 18 to 24-year-old youth that are homeless on the streets. And what we find is that some of them, this is their first time being out of an environment where they've had care given to them, and they don't know how to live independently yet. And so we've partnered with Trinity Lutheran Church in Latrobe to have a house for 5 18 to 24-year-olds where they live in community with one another. They have their own rooms, but share those living spaces, dining room, kitchen, that type of thing. And we're able to, again, bring services there. Additionally, we have volunteers, and we're always looking for more, that go and work with those guys to provide life skills classes, how to cook meals, how to budget, working on those types of things, getting them to the grocery store, and providing mentorship, helping them begin to advocate for themselves and begin to understand what they're going to need when they transition out of that shared housing environment into their own apartment.
In the shared housing, is there somebody that is the supervisor that lives in that house and that helps those 18 to 24-year-olds to make sure that they are staying in bounds? Right?
Sure. We actually take the philosophy of empowerment in all of our programs, and so we really try to give folks the independence that they need to be successful and to try to make sure that we help catch them when they're succeeding and not when they're failing, right? So we don't have anybody living there with them. We do have cameras around the facility and in the common spaces, and we meet every morning with them to make sure that everything's going okay. Our case management staff goes in and works with the clients individually and in the group dynamic. And we also have what we call housing support specialists who go in and they make sure that the place is being kept clean. They make sure that folks are working on the things that they need to do in order to maintain a housing environment so that when they make that transition, they'll be able to be a good tenant.
Dan, I hear every single day with my role at the chamber that we are struggling to get skilled workers. Is there a connection with the union mission and trying to make sure that those young men are getting the skills that they need to get the jobs that the employers are looking for?
Absolutely, and that goes through all of our programs where we set up as part of our case management strategy, working with folks in certain areas, and one of those areas is education and employability. And so we will help those folks that want to get enrolled in school to do that or to receive training. We have, fortunately in our area, a local VOTEC school that offers CNC operating training. We have in New Alexandria some heavy equipment training. There are opportunities available for our men to engage in that type of environment. Additionally, through that mentoring program for that 18 to 24-year-old, we're finding a lot of opportunity there for folks to, again, develop those skill sets. We're working with one of our young men right now who will actually be going, he graduated with from high school with horticulture background, and so we're getting him in the Penn State Gardeners Master Gardeners program right now so that he can kind of extend that. It's a passion of his, something he enjoys doing, and we're hoping for him that it'll transition him into a better position for employment in a nursery or with landscaping.
We're talking with Dan Carney, Executive Director of the Union Mission. If you're interested in learning more about the Union Mission, jump on their website, unionmission.org, or search them on Facebook. Men Matter at the Union on Facebook. If you want to contact them directly, you can call their office at 724-539-3550. You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on Hometown Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. We'll be right back after these messages.
This is Westmoreland Community Connections on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. If you have a suggestion for a topic, or if your nonprofit organization would like to be featured on this program, call us during regular business hours at 724-216-1200.
Welcome back. You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections. I'm your host, President and CEO of the Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce, Chad Amond. I am delighted to have Dan Carney, Executive Director of Union Mission, on the show today. Dan, before we went to break, we were talking a little bit about all of the programs that are provided by Union Mission. One of the things that is critically important is the funding and the sponsors and the supporters. Talk about how Union Mission is funded and supported and to keep it alive.
Sure. We are very fortunate that a lot of the programs that we were just talking about, and one that we'll continue to talk about here shortly, are HUD-funded programs. And so those that operate outside of the shelter setting are very much taken care of in terms of funding. We don't have to do a lot of fundraising. But for the shelter and some of our services that go around that, we really rely on the community. We work very hard every year to solicit fundraising through grant writing and foundations, but we're largely supported by the community. We have a lot of individuals, businesses, churches in the community that see value in the work that we're doing there, that see our men kind of coming through and transitioning out, and they appreciate that and, of course, support us to make sure that we can make that work happen. We do try to do a few fundraisers throughout the year to help raise money for the organization as well.
Well, some of those fundraisers are also friend raisers, right? Because you need to make sure that you're connecting the people that are supportive of your organization to make sure that they are aware of the good work that you are doing. And I know that you've hosted. I've been to a couple of the banquets and the dinners that you've had. But what are some of, if the community and the listeners are interested in supporting you? Is there an upcoming event that is going to be happening soon?
The most recent upcoming event would be our Festa de Octubre, which occurs, it'll be October 26th this year. It's the last Friday in October. That'll be a dinner event at Rizzo's. And it's really nice as you talk about fundraising, and it is important to make that connection for us. We always have a graduate come and speak at that function. And it's an opportunity for people to hear, not through the lens of the staff or the people who are committed to the project, but somebody who actually went through and is now on their way toward building a more successful future.
Well, I'm all over the board, and we talked about the funding and the sponsors and the supporters, but I want to get back into one of the programs that you are providing, rapid rehousing. Tell the listeners about what rapid rehousing is and how it impacts the men in the homeless men in our area.
Sure. So rapid rehousing, as with all of our programs, it's always about trying to match that household or that person with the appropriate type of response for their need. What makes sense to that individual or that family? And rapid rehousing actually is a 7-county-wide southwestern Pennsylvania collaborative grant. In Westmoreland County, we are the lead agency. And we work closely with Fayette County Community Action, who administers the grant for the 7-county region. Rapid rehousing is a program that we operate that serves not just men, but single females and families in the community, that provides them with immediate assistance to transition into a new place. So first month's rent, security deposit, utility turn-ons, and provides that level of support that they need through case management to make sure that they get stable in that environment. And so we acknowledge that when we look at homelessness, most people have been successfully housed for a number of years of their life, and we want to leverage those successes. So, okay, you had a setback. Let's get you back on your feet, and then let's make sure that we take care of those things that led to the setback so that you can continue to go forward and maybe have another 30 years of housing success. We want to build on that. And it's really nice because when we're talking about housing families, then we're able to really work with keeping children in school, and they're not having to move school districts because they don't have to go to a new area within the county, we're able to help that family very quickly transition, normally within 30 days, into their own apartment, and then help to build that support around them.
Well, you mentioned the importance of working collaboratively, and I agree with that 100%. Recently, Union Mission worked with some other not-for-profit providers to establish a coordinated entry process to help streamline access to some housing programs. Can you talk a little bit more about the coordinated entry program?
Absolutely. Coordinated entry is one of those things that was mandated by HUD to make things easier for folks experiencing homelessness. And in Westmoreland County specifically, we worked with Community Action, the Housing Authority, and SPHS, who operates the Women and Family Shelter Program, and some other permanent supportive housing programs to establish this process. And what it does is it allows us to, first acknowledge that oftentimes we don't have enough programs and services to meet the demand. And so it's very important for us to prioritize how we're going to serve those people who are in need. And coordinated entry does that. Every person or family who's experiencing a housing crisis goes through the same assessment process now and gets scored through a prioritization assessment that places them onto a master list that allows all of these programs now to collaboratively work together to serve the highest need, the largest acuity in our community first. And so we're able to kind of look at that list and make sure that if this family or this person is in really more need than the next person, we serve that person first. And so it's really a neat venture that has allowed us to move through our waiting lists and programs pretty readily. One of the really neat statistics that we found across this is that we're now able to move someone from homelessness into permanent housing within 30 days.
Oh, wow.
And so we're really getting good at helping people connect to housing services and opportunities and reducing the amount of time that they're spent homeless, reducing the burden on the shelters to provide that network. And when we're talking about accessing services, not having to do tens of applications. When they go through the assessment process, they're now made eligible for all of those programs at once. They don't have to call those individual entities anymore.
You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on Hometown Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. We're talking with Dan Carney, Executive Director of Union Mission. If you're interested in learning more about Union Mission, you can jump on their website, theunionmission.org, or call their office at 724-539-3550. Dan, I have to ask the question, what are you and your organization most proud of with the impact that you've had? You've been with Union Mission, you said 14 years, and I had a connection. I mean, years and years ago, my dad helped to do some renovation on a project. It was probably 25 years ago, but I've always had a part of my heart that was with Union Mission. What are you most proud of over the last 14 years that you've done to impact our community?
That's a tough question to answer, really. For us as a whole, as an organization, I would say I'm most proud of the fact that we've really tried to examine our role simply beyond being a shelter provider. So looking at the entire scope of homelessness in the community and saying, you know what, we have a vital role to play in that continuum of care and stepping up to the plate. And of course, we wouldn't be able to do that without the support that we receive in the community, without our volunteers, without the dedicated team that I have that has allowed us to make those moves. And certainly getting this building, this 5-year project underway, and to start to see the ground moving and the foundation being set up is a very exciting time for us at Union Mission.
So if we're sitting here a year from now, and we're celebrating and high-fiving what has been a great year, what did you achieve if we're here a year from now?
I would say for us, making sure that we get that building completed. We're at a 7-month projection completed date, being in the building and occupying it, and making sure that we've eliminated effectively the waiting list for emergency housing services for men. That would be a great highlight for us, to no longer have to have somebody wait to access that emergency housing.
Dan Carney, Executive Director with Union Mission, thank you very much for being on the show. Is there anything else that you would like to make sure that the listeners are aware of, or to make sure that they understand the impact that you're having on Westmoreland County and beyond?
I would say that if they have an interest in the organization and the work that we're doing, we're always looking for volunteers. And we have opportunities that range from helping to answer the phone and working in the office to providing some direct support to the individuals and families we serve. And so we always will work with someone's skill set. We'll find a place where they feel comfortable and fit in. But that allows us, that support allows us to do the work that we're doing with a small team. We really rely on that volunteer support that we receive.
Dan Carney, Executive Director of Union Mission, thank you very much for being on the show. We applaud the work that you're doing to impact our community.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
You've been listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on Hometown Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. Join us next week, same time, same place, for another edition of Westmoreland Community Connections. Thanks for listening, everyone.
This has been Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings in and around Westmoreland County. Join us again next week on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB.